not coming up. It might take a second. Because the video is like, my video is not coming up. Audio is. Audio is not going through, and it's not going to YouTube. It's just, at least not yet. Okay. Oh, it might be an audio setting actually. Why they can't hear it? Oh yeah. On the computer. Okay. Yeah. I'll run back in. There we go. Oh no. No, that's not good. That's not good. Oh, we had a ramble.
Broadcast, and staff should be able to use that solution independently of UCAT involvement for any things throughout the day where they needed the hybrid setup. So we have, right now, we're in progress implementing an enterprise hybrid meeting solution. Thanks to UCAT, they're helping us fund it in this room, the Zoom room. So that will be available in the coming weeks. What that will consist of is a new projector, which is in, you can see here. And there will be a screen that is on a cart. It will move around, but we envision it being in this area here. It's an 86-inch screen, so it should be very viewable for any of the board members and the audience. And that will contain a device that can join a Teams or a Zoom meeting. The device itself can join, and then just display the participants on that screen. That will leave the freedom of the projector up here, us being able to use the projector while interacting with the remote participants over here on the screen. And it's all set up so that DCAT can effectively broadcast and switch between the presentation and the presenters and kind of all aspects of the hybrid meeting scenario. We've piloted this down at 2 Burroughs Street with the electric department and the business division. It's worked well, but we've learned some lessons from that we're applying to the setup here in the Toomey room. So I think we'll have a smoother setup here, an even smoother setup here. And this should be nice and effective. I'm excited to see it in operation. Any questions?
Before, I was going to add, I started to interrupt you rudely, but for this board, I think a good example of it not working, if you recall in the fall, David Fields had a consultant presenting some work that they did in our C1 district, and there was a PowerPoint on the screen. The consultant was in a small box on the screen. The sound was echoing off of the laptop that was over here, and it seemed whenever we advanced a slide, the consultant's face would be covering key information on the screen. So what Colby's describing would allow the presentation to be presented on the screen, the consultant to be appropriately interacting with the board off to the side, and sound that's not reverberating. This could be useful for example, and I think there's a policy aspect of the discussion. I don't think it'll be in place for the budget workshop, although maybe I'll be surprised. But you could imagine during the all-day budget workshop, if people wanted to participate from home on a Saturday, they could tune in there and see the presentation. Or if you have a public hearing that you know is going to be of great interest, people would have the choice to come in person or a seamless way to participate without having to come in. So it's really, I think it's a convenience for residents. Quite honestly, I think we haven't done heavy consulting since the pandemic, but in the old days, you would do an RFP, and if you hired a consultant from out of state, typically what was buried in the fees that you were paying were travel back and forth to get on site to do certain things. This is one more way that we can start to leverage some of the people's comfort with doing that kind of work remotely. So as we started to talk about at the last meeting, this is something we want to pilot. We want to get the tech, I think, as they said, the technologies at Borough Street now. We'll have it set up in this room. It won't be available for every meeting because there's a staff effort that goes along with some of this. But certainly as we move forward, we'll be able to start incorporating this into some of the public hearings we have for to make it easier for both the residents and the presenters.
I'll start with Select Board Member Bernard.
I think it's great, Colby. Thank you for putting the time and effort into it. You know, as long as we really just let people know what we expect, or what expectations we have, you know, with regards to, you know, what are the procedures that they have to follow. You know, I mean, that's key, keeping it open. But yeah, no, I'm all for it. Thank you.
Select Board Member Bennett.
Thank you. Colby, I'm a little confused. We're talking about a consultant taking advantage of this. They don't have to travel to here. They can make their presentation. But a member of the public body may also participate remotely. And you list personal illness, personal disability, emergency military service, geographic distance. But what if I just don't want to participate in the public realm as a member of a board? Is that permissible for them to say, no, I'm going to stay home?
That's a Aaron memo, not a Colby memo, so I'm going to save Colby from having to answer that question, unless you want to answer it, Colby.
I could try, but you might not agree with my answer.
Colby, the IT guy is going to say, let them participate from wherever they want.
Yeah, yeah.
I think the answer to that is that gets back to the sort of the expectations and the norms of the board. I think the norm and expectation would be that if you're local, you're present. This is not for standard operating. This is that in an event where you travel to state, you're able to tune into the meeting and then tend to what you're working with. So this would not be standard practice.
So it'd be a case-by-case basis based upon a situation that may come up unexpectedly.
Correct.
Okay, fine, that's good.
Yeah, something we'd have available for those types of situations, yeah.
And direct this to anybody on the back page. I'm going to read paragraph 2 under procedures. Members of public bodies who participate remotely may vote and are not be deemed absent. Are we missing a word?
A B is extraneous and are not deemed absent.
So not to be, but just take the B out?
Mm-hmm.
All right, thank you. Before we get to the recommendation, just a question on it. Is there a time limit on this participation recommendation? Do we plan to review it at some point in time? Or is it something that we're going to vote on and it'll be forever?
Typically, you would be voting to opt into it as written, and typically the process to leave is the same process that goes in. So a vote of the board would adopt, and theoretically a vote of the board would sort of come out. I don't have a specific answer to that. We're also not under a time constraint to vote this tonight per se. So if that's a question the board wanted more information on, we could certainly provide that.
Well, I'm just wondering if we may want to review it at some point in time in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Just part of the motion to review it after so many years, just how's it working out? Can we improve it, or shall we throw it in the bucket? Just my thoughts when we get to that piece of it. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Select Board Member Mills?
I think this is well presented. I think it's a necessary procedure to have the staff recommendation for the, for the vote. I certainly think it's neat, clean, we should do it, and when it's time, I'm glad to move the recommendation of staff.
Thank you. Select Board Member Duggan?
Thank you. Just a few questions, Colby. First, the model that you've described with having a large screen here in this room, that sounds like what we do today in the senior center, where remote board members or committee members can be on the screen along with members of the public. And so that seems to work quite well. I see that as kind of not necessarily the gold standard, but that is a model to kind of try to replicate at the other locations that we broadcast from. This room and also at the middle school. So for this room, the large screen probably won't work over there because I don't think any of the cameras point that way, which is why those gentlemen are sitting there. So that,
that's why they sit there, huh?
that's right. So you may want to rethink the location, but
I think Greg wanted to offer some.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead. You'll explain it better.
Okay, so, yeah, if you don't mind, to answer that question first, the feed from that screen will directly feed into our system.
Oh,
so
I
we won't
see,
need to cover
okay.
it with the camera. The other thing, just as far as timeline, that was brought up before, the build is actually happening now. So you might have seen me running around like crazy. We had a little tech issue to start, but we're expected to have it done by the end of the week. There's one piece of missing capacity that'll take a few months to build out. So at first, DCAT will have to be here to help with any of these hybrid meetings to tie it in and use our system. But once the last missing piece that's in the supply chain somewhere rolls in, the town, for any meetings during the day, we'll be able to go over to the computer and just start it sort of push button without our needing to be there. So there's a meeting with a consultant during the day. I know we did a retirement board hearing at one point. That's something that you could easily just jump on and join the call, and the participants in the room can talk back and forth. And the other part is, as good as this senior center is, we're actually upgrading that as well, because it's a little clunky, the setup, so it'll be a little even smoother than it is.
Right.
Thank you.
So are your long-term plans to make that also a room available for this kind of hybrid meeting?
Senior center?
Yes.
Yeah, it is currently, but it'll be easier to operate, and it'll be push button just like here.
Okay.
So if there's a meeting during the day, anyone could jump down and do it. Thank you.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Roger.
Can I?
No, that's fine. So just back to the senior center. So that still needs some tweaking, specifically the wiring across the floors. So
Exactly.
I think I was told by Ethan that the wires will be relocated to the ceiling, and that will clean up that
Yes.
that
So
aspect of it.
yeah, we've sort of been doing it DIY, and I'm glad it's working as well as it is, but this is more intentionally built out. And when we initially did the design for the senior center, hybrid meetings were just not a thing yet. We completed the build out, and then once we saw that it was needed, we made it work for now, but this will be
Yeah.
much more efficient.
But overall, the senior center seems to be the kind of the gold standard, so to say, in terms of what to strive for. I like the ability for the public to be on the screen and actually be able to participate in the ongoing discussions of whatever the agenda items are. And I don't know if that's something that we should consider here as well for this board, but at least having the ability to have board members who are not able to make it physically to this location to actually be on, be able to call in is important. And then just one last thing is the middle school. So that location, it says it's a multi-purpose room, but broadcasting from there doesn't seem to be one of the purposes that it was designed for. So there's been some issues recently with the school committee broadcast. Either the taping is starting late or it's just the sound isn't that great. So does, I know that you struggle with that. It's frustrating for DCAT to kind of try to utilize the technology in there. It seems to be outdated in terms of the wiring and the cameras. So I guess this is a question for Colby. Is there an effort or a plan to upgrade that equipment to make it kind of even?
So the first thing I'll just address about the Holton Richmond room is, I don't think it was designed for long-term use. If the town were to decide that, there's certainly something we could explore as DCAT, as far as improving it. Right now, we're doing it sort of on an as-needed basis, which I think, it creates issues. We don't mind doing it, but if it was the kind of space that the town would like to use more consistently, it's certainly something we could explore.
Have we considered perhaps, instead of meetings at the multipurpose room, moving some meetings to the, I can't remember the name of the hall, the auditorium at the high school? That's already pre-wired in some instances for DCAT use. I realize it's a large room and you might be way oversized for a building, but do we want to build out 3 or 4 rooms? If that room is more conducive to a meeting, do we think that maybe that should be a priority over the multipurpose room?
I do think, as Greg was saying, the multi-purpose room became a meeting space out of necessity during COVID when we needed to be able to socially distance. The auditorium just didn't work because of the way that the seating is set up. There's no way to get people in and out of those rows without crawling over each other. So we defaulted to that room, which the very first time we met there, we understood it. It's deficient space. It was not designed for that. And I don't think, be recommending to invest heavy technology in that space when we're hoping to stop meeting there altogether and go back to the auditorium, the band room at the high school, the senior center, this space, Borough Street, potentially the police training room is another site that would make a lot of sense.
What about the Smith School? Is that
That's probably already
set?
Yeah, and I think, as with the policy part, I think we may get to a point where every meeting has this component in it, but I think we don't want to overpromise that out of the gate. We'll get used to having it. We'll use it. The budget hearing is a perfect example of when we want to try that out. If we don't have public hearings on an agenda, it might not make sense to set that up, but we'll learn and adapt as we go.
Yeah, just to kind of reiterate, I think it's important to have the residents be able to participate in many of these meetings without physically having to go to the location. I mean, and it's a struggle for some. If you sit in front of a keyboard all day, then kind of these remote meetings are kind of business as usual. But if you're someone that's not really familiar with the technology, you can struggle just to find the mute button or that. So whatever we can do to kind of streamline it and make it more user friendly, I think, and not just take for granted that people know how to do. How to use this technology for participating. So that's all I have at the moment.
So I do have some questions. Some of them are going to be for you, Mr. Town Manager, and others just comments or things that I think we should consider before voting on this. I've worked remotely since COVID started, March of 2020. And my day is all day long Teams meetings. So you're right, I'm familiar with the technology. I know how to turn on my mic and to mute myself and take myself on and off camera, how to join meetings, because that's the role. And people don't necessarily. A couple of things I want to mention is there's going to be a point that we can't overcome someone's ability to themselves join a meeting. But there's no way to traverse that. And what we're offering is enhancing a meeting experience, which I fully agree with you that we should embrace the fact that some members of the public can't be here, and on the rare occasions that a member of the board can't be here, allow them to participate remotely. But the fact that DCAT films these, the fact that this is going to be a new technology to further enhance people's participation may become we may become a victim of success. And the reason I say that is DCAT does a fantastic job, but there are technical hurdles, there's technical glitches, there's transitions, things are outside their opportunity to fix, and they work diligently to fix them when they happen. Meetings start late, meetings may not kick off right on time, including this one I'm hearing. And it happens. It's a technology reality. But the meeting being being broadcast is not a by right. It is not a thing that should be expected to be 100% flawless. The success of DCAT has gotten people so used to it. It's like the electricity reliability is, yeah, when we have a power outage, it happens and occurs, and people, kind of react to that. But the reality is, power outages occur, transmission issues occur, technical issues occur. So I would want to temper some of the concerns and complaints we've been hearing, so the select board has been hearing, with the reality that we've provided a benefit, something extra and above the fact that we're supposed to hold a public meeting. And the public meeting is in body, in place. And now we're extending it to the benefit of people. That should not become the 100% expectation of people. I said I would reference this, we did receive an email from a resident who voiced her concern about remote meetings. She indicated she thought it was unlawful. It is actually not unlawful what we've been doing and will continue to do. We will continue to comport to the law about participation. She does talk about, meetings starting late, technical issues. Well, some of the technical issues are meetings starting late because of the broadcast opportunities. Some of them are the person doesn't know how to take themselves off mute. But that happens in real life and it happens in business every day. So I appreciate that she sent her concerns and her thoughts. I think this will address that part of it. Now, what I've heard is the town manager reiterate, we are returning to in-person meetings. That's the baseline. Of that, if there is a special case for which shy of a majority of that board wishes to participate remotely, that will now be able to happen. And we're going to extend it after this pilot to residents who want to call in. So I think that addresses some of the concerns that were expressed. I think it's born from COVID and the necessity of doing remote. We now have an opportunity for participation by experts, by people who are remote, by people who have to be remote for whatever reason, and by the member of the public who wants to be remote, because some people find it daunting to come here or find it time challenging to come here. We have a meeting at 6 o'clock. Well, some people work in Boston till 5, and it makes it difficult to get here. So I think we're actually extending and offering, and this hybrid is a beneficial opportunity. I do have a couple of discussion points about the pilot, because and you have to pilot. You have to pilot somewhere, you have to pilot with someone. And I'm happy that it would be the Board of Selectmen and our meetings, because initially it's going to be just this room. So to you, Mr. Town Manager, what about the other boards and committees that meet in other rooms? Are they expected to be fully, to have all members in the room at that time until we get the technology for this?
No, I mean, we've been able to do that with a simple laptop setup the way we did during COVID. So
Okay.
In the event that a board or committee member needed to do that, they would have,
Just like we had.
one member can do that now.
Okay.
With this vote, you could have, if it's a 5-member board, 2 members could participate that way.
I would think that we will discover as we go along that there should be some conditions on remote participation. For example, I don't think we should allow, I think we should consider whether we should allow participation remotely if the person presenting, if the expert or whoever it is presenting maps or documents or artifacts that the board members would want to see. And let's go with, I'll pick the ZBA or planning board. Those require large dedicated maps sometimes. I don't think that would be a candidate for the expert or the applicant to present via remote access. But again, we'll figure it out as we go along. This is going to be a learn-as-you-go opportunity. The other thing I would want to understand, and again, this may not have been fleshed out yet because it's learn as you go and it's a pilot. Who will control the meeting? The open meeting law, for those who've gone through it, state that the chairman recognizes whoever is to speak. And no one else can speak until the chairman recognizes them. And we've heard horror stories in Beverly about meetings, the Board of Health meetings being overrun by participants who just bomb the meeting. So I'd want to make sure that we have the opportunity, is there going to be a person who's facilitating the technology, or are we gonna leave it to are we gonna give the chairperson the ability to mute all until we're ready to go to people? During true COVID, when we were truly remote, all of us, there was someone we had Jen Breaker who would say, okay, as the chairman I would say, I recognize Maureen, and then Maureen would be unmuted, she'd speak, so on and so forth. What is and maybe it's not baked yet and has to be built, what is going to be the process of managing the meeting and the speakers? Did I just tee up a softball for you?
No, it's an excellent question, and I think you make all good points, and some of those things we need to figure out, some of those things we already have ideas on, but
Okay.
we probably need to build a procedure around that really nails it down. So I'd say we're in the analysis phase.
Very good.
From a policy perspective, I'd like to, one of the things we learned during COVID is that if the staff person who staffs a committee is also the technical expert, it's not productive to have that person trying to manage the mute buttons and the meeting while also engaging with the board. I think it's also too much to ask the chair of the board or committee to be managing the technology and the speakers. So I like to believe we're going to come out of whatever this is, and the national politics that have been on fire at the local level are going to calm down. And so when this becomes the norm, things like Zoom bombing probably go away. But I wouldn't assume anything. I think it's a fair question. I don't think, this gets to when I say this has to do with the policy, we wouldn't want to have an IT person on call every weeknight to be managing these meetings if only one person is going to participate that way. Because I think that's, frankly, it's not a good use of our resources. It's also not fair to ask the staff person to be working nights all the time. So we need to figure that out. If there's a way, if there's a simple way, it may not be necessary to manage it. It may manage itself, but we'll figure that out.
Very good. I'm just, similar to the open meeting here, we just don't let people jump up and speak. They have to be recognized. And so we don't want the technology to remove that opportunity to successfully manage the meeting and the flow.
I could imagine a scenario where there's a TV remote sitting on the dais, and if somebody's being unruly, they can simply hit the mute button, which is like the 21st century version of a gavel, I suppose.
Yes. And I agree. I think we should start with the BOS, and I also agree with Select Board Member Bennett. I think there should be I would ask that when the motion comes up, we should consider a review in 3 months to hear, how the pilots went and subsequent policies and procedures, because I think this falls to us, to say if there is any boards that we're saying here in your motion, all boards.
Then that is all or nothing. You can't distinguish.
Okay. But I think we should hear back about what processes, because if there is going to be limitations or necessary rules around participation, like if you're presenting a map, it can't be through a screen.
Just to be, the vote only governs the body itself.
Okay, it doesn't.
The public that's a policy decision that is completely outside of
the vote.
the
So the vote is
CMR.
only for the board members. And
It creates the opportunity for board members.
Okay, and we
shy
may
of a
extend that with certain parameters for participants.
Correct. The technology that'll be in place for board members will be the same technology that would be useful to have the public or presenters participating. And I think to the point, if we determine that policy is necessary, we can certainly write it. But the staff person and the chair managing the ZBA, I don't think, in terms of what documents they want to have in their hands, I'm not sure we want to write the policy in advance. I think we want
Want to wait and see?
Correct.
Okay. This is not a public hearing, it's a presentation, but I'll use my chairman's discretion. Mr. Zubarik is broadcast and may have some insight based on his experience that, I saw your hand up if you still want to talk.
I absolutely would like to.
Okay.
I'm itching at the bit.
All right, provide some opportunity and latitude to have you ask questions as it relates to the recommendations being offered.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Mark Zubrick. I have been listening to what's been discussed today, and one of the things that struck me very early on this discussion is, are we eliminating open meeting law requirements?
Please
Because-
elaborate. How are we doing so?
Well, the thing is, open meetings and public meetings are supposed to be held in public in person, according to what the law says right now. Now,
Well,
I have
so
no-
let me answer the question. Because
Yes,
you,
please.
So I have a copy of the open meeting law here.
Yeah.
We are supposed to have it in public, and that would still be a public opportunity. The majority of the board would have to be here publicly, but the governor has extended, and the law is changing to allow for some amount of remote participation for less than a majority of the board. They still actively participate, and so the law is changing to allow this. We're embracing that.
I don't know whether the law is changing, but I'll buy that. The thing is, we have remote conference calls with the Board of Selectmen back 20 years ago. So that was the same thing. Appreciate meetings being held now in public. The remote meetings were very extraordinary at that time. I didn't, think that was the proper thing, but that's what it was, and that's what it is. It's over, hopefully. But I just want to see the open meeting law, intent of the open meeting law, eliminated by this procedure. I understand that there have been all kinds of issues that have been guided by the Attorney General and state, organization. But I think we need to go back to the open meeting in person, as you've said in your guidance that you're putting out. But I think that is necessary because right now the public is eliminated from the discussions that you're having. And I appreciate your time and your effort on letting me speak. But I feel that I'm speaking not just for myself, but a lot of other people. And the thing is that we need to return back to the open meeting, and I hope we're not violating it. Thank you.
So I want to make sure, because your points are valid, I just want to make sure you understand. The town manager opened with, public meetings return. Every board will meet in public from now on.
Right.
It will be a public meeting, it'll be meeting in public in person, with the opportunity that if someone cannot make it on rare occasions, they can participate remotely according to the open meeting law and the guidance by the Attorney General and the Governor. We don't do anything that's illegal and jeopardize open meeting law.
I understand that, and I wholeheartedly support your position. But I think we need to make sure that we keep that in the mind, because the open meeting is very an opportunity to come before you or before any other committee, because that have happened over the last 2 years, and I feel like they're included in a lot of these committee meetings, and their input is not being accepted. So thank you very much for letting me speak.
Mr. Chairman, for the record, the town has not conducted a single meeting during COVID out of compliance with the open meeting law. I just want to make sure that anybody watching is aware of that.
Yes, and I agree. And to the point that there is frustration with COVID and frustration with the way we had to act and respond, we've done everything legal in open meeting, and this actually brings us to a point that you're seeking, Mr. Zuback, which is public meetings. There's nothing here that is contrary to that direction of design.
Thank you.
So, members, are there other comments they want before we take a motion to vote?
Yeah, I have a comment.
Please.
So I just wanted to follow up on Mr. Zubrick's point, because we struggled and I say we, the town, and a number of committees and boards struggled back in the spring of 2020 where we forced residents to submit questions by email or through an intermediary on the phone. And so we had boards or committees interacting with, we'll say, applicants. There may have been business before those bodies. And yet the public were forced to kind of stay in the sidelines, basically. They were, trying to think, you think of a question during the proceedings, and then you have to put it into an email and send it. And by the time it makes it to the body, they've already moved on to another agenda item. So I think Mr. Zubarik is spot on that even though you may be adhering to the letter of the open meeting law, you're not really adhering to the spirit of it. And I think that's kind of what people, they may get confused about saying that we're violating the law. We're not violating the law, but on the same hand, we're not making it so that the public is fully engaged.
So I got to say that COVID hit us all, the entire nation, and forced us into new directions that we could never have anticipated or planned on or been ready for. And we struggled hard to keep government running while being forced to be remote. And I understand that the early days, certain processes were put in place that then were later evolved and refined. It was an evolution. We can't fix that past. We can make sure we don't do it in the future. And none of this predicates or suggests going back to submit a question. We were all trying to figure out how to, no one had Zoom. No one had it at home. No one knew how to use it. It was all new technology. And we had to try to figure out a balance of keeping government running with new technology that many of us were unfamiliar with new processes. So I can appreciate that people used to feel that way, but if you were to poll them today, they have opportunities to participate even remotely. They may not think it is the same as an in-person experience, and I can appreciate that as well. But we're still struggling now to get past COVID restrictions and health issues that we need to get past. So in this case, we've passed the COVID part. Now we're able to capitalize on the good things that brought us. The good things it brought us was the opportunity for remote participation by the public, as well as, if needed, a board member who may come down with COVID and they want to do their civic duty, but they don't want to infect the board, or they have to travel unexpectedly. They want to do their duty, but can't do it in person. What this has actually done is evolved the in-person necessity, and the governor and the attorney general and the laws are changed to allow for their vote to actually count. I do appreciate that people have felt that way in the past, but it's also tempered with the fact that this is all evolutionary. No one could have anticipated or known how to react to this 2.5 years ago. So, did you have any other board member comments or discussions?
I'm all set.
Okay. I'll entertain a motion.
All right, Mr. Chairman, if I may, I'd like to make the recommendation the board vote to allow remote participation at all subsequent meetings of all applicable local public bodies in the town of Danvers per the requirements of 940 CMR 29.10 with a review after 6 months of implementation.
Second.
The review by the Board of Selectmen, is that what you meant? Or who do you want the reviewing body to be?
The Board of Selectmen are voting
Okay,
on
I
this,
just wanna make
so
sure.
the board would
Okay,
get an
very
update
good.
after 6 months of implementation.
Okay.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion?
Can I just make a
Yes.
comment, Carter? I think everything that you have said is really, really valid. As I'm sitting here and I try to keep things simple so I don't get confused. Remote participation is necessary for us to function at this time and has been for the last 2 years. Public participation is not only a good thing, it is required by law unless there is some reason why it can't happen. Committed good people working together to solve the problem will work it out. And so I think the motion is good. I think we should vote it. And I am confident that our people and the management will come up with something that works in accordance with the requirements that are published for us for the time being. Thank you. I suppose all that is obvious, but that's what was coming to mind as I'm sitting here.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions on the motion? And I agree. I agree. And the expectation should be, this is a motion about participation by board members. And eventually we will evolve to remote participation by the public. But initially, this is about board members. So, all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It passes. Thank you for your hard work in preparing the presentation. We appreciate it.
And I don't know if Greg is staying or going, but I want to echo what Colby said at the beginning and thank Greg and his team, not only for the problem solving and man and woman hours to work on this, but also the financial investment that they're making into the technology, because we don't have the resources on the town side without their help to do this. So thank you, Greg.
Thank you. The board will continue discussion of the potential establishment of recall election provision. I had, after the last meeting, I had asked and had forwarded the emails from the public, a dozen plus or minus, from the public, requesting that the selectmen consider a select board consider a select board warrant regarding a recall opportunity. At that, two meetings ago, the board provided the opportunity for a subcommittee to get together. We did, between Select Board Member Mills, myself, the town manager, the town clerk, town council, and some other input. We looked at what other home rule petitions had been presented and passed by the state legislature and pulled together language that seemed to work appropriately for the town of Danvers. You all received this spreadsheet. I'm not passing down anything you haven't already seen. And this is basically the town clerk. I'm going to ask her to describe the list serve process by which we got some of these back. I don't need to paraphrase what you already know. So if you could tell us what you did and how you did it and what you received back.
Sure. The town clerks in Massachusetts have a distribution list where we can send out questions to other communities on different topics, whatever that may be. So I took the opportunity to send out to all the clerks in that group and ask them several questions, whether they have a recall, what their affidavit numbers are, and give me some basic information. So I was able to get responses from, I don't know, I think it was like 11 or 12 communities responded back. So I was able to put that information down.
15.
15. So they're not obligated to respond. However, you know, if they have time and it's a topic that's of interest to them, they'll respond and provide whatever information they're up to providing.
And it's obvious by the research I also did that not all of them, again, they're not obligated to, and
No.
not all of the ones with recall petitions did respond.
Correct.
There are at least 74 that I counted. And there's probably more because in order to find it, you have to go to mass.gov and then for every calendar year, walk your way back, do a search, and try to divine which were Senate bills, which were House bills, which were the current law. But there were 75 communities that I found in the last few years, of which 15 of them have responded here. So this is not an unusual process. It's not a rare process. And as I said before, I recognize that this came as a result of recent incidents and people's dissatisfaction with votes or directions, actions, or whatever it may be, that prompted the question. But I lifted it from that incident or whatever may have happened and said, we simply as a community don't have an ability for the community to remove someone they feel is unfit to be there for appropriate reasons, crime or moral ineptitude that, you know, if they're accused of something. And it gave me pause that there was no methodology, and I'm not talking about any one board or any specific elected position or person. I'm just saying there was no opportunity that if something horrific were to happen, someone were to sit at their seat as an elected official and start espousing white supremacist statements, there'd be no way for the board, obviously can't react. We can't remove someone who was duly elected. And the citizens would have no recourse other than waiting till that person's next election. So that was the driving force, not an incident in town, not an incident with any board or commission. It was, we were asked for that reason, but the reason that drove the continued work was, we have no recourse. So the language that's presented is a culmination of the other home rule petitions that have already passed the legislature. It's a pretty, I don't want to say boilerplate, but it's a pretty standard layout of what the legislature's already approved, with tweaks to it based on the community. Each community has a different population, each community has a different voter base, and so each community offered two standards. And so for people who are watching at home, this is a recall petition is a two-step process. The first step is for a number of citizens to get together and sign an affidavit. That affidavit then that is signatures of registered voters in the town at the time. That affidavit is presented to the town clerk, who validates the signatures and then prepares and presents petition language that then the proponents of the petition go out and get another number of signatures. When that happens and those numbers of signatures are validated, it becomes an election to recall someone. That is to say, person X, I'll say Fred Flintstone. Someone went through the process, they identified why they wanted Fred Flintstone gone, removed. So many people got an affidavit, they were all validated. So many people then signed the petition, they were all validated. An election is held. And the choice is recall Fred Flintstone or don't recall Fred Flintstone. That's it. If Fred is recalled, he is given an opportunity to resign. If he doesn't, or I'm sorry, between the petition and the election, he's given an opportunity to resign. If they don't, the election goes forward. When the election goes forward, if Fred is, by a majority vote of the people who cast ballots, is removed, then Fred's done. Fred's out. That seat is vacated, and as is, and I'm talking about what we've come up together and presenting what we've come up to. If it's vacated, then the current policies of the board will fill the remainder of that calendar, of that elective year. In the case of the Board of Selectmen, the remaining board members would appoint someone to cover till the next annual election. If there's any remaining term after that, that seat is up. So if it was a 3-year term, Fred was removed in his first year, midway in his first year. The board would appoint a replacement to carry through to next May. And then in May, there would be not only the normal cycle of elections for select board members, but another seat for the remainder of that person's term. And that's how that would get filled and maintain the cycle. So we had discussions, or we looked at the numbers for the affidavits, we looked at the numbers for the number of signatures, and it is this board's discretion to set those thresholds. Recently, since the last time this was a public meeting, we had, I had discussions with the town manager and with Mr. Mills because of the subcommittee position. And based on comments that we heard at the last meeting, there was comments at the last meeting and after the last meeting about, is there conditions for recall? Do you have to enumerate why you're recalling or not recalling? There is a concern, and from other factions, that this would be used as political weapon for people who disagree about decisions that are lawfully made. A person is elected, they're elected to make decisions. If that person makes lawfully allowed decisions, that should not be cause for a recall. If there's malfeasance, if there's a moral ineptitude, if there's some reason to remove them, a crime or something else, yes. But we conferred with town council again, and have added the items, the language that you see in yellow. People can't see it at this point, but basically it says, they shall be dated and the petition presented by the town clerk shall contain the names of all persons to whom they are issued, the name of the person whose recall is sought, and the grounds of the recall. So it'll have to say, we're going to get rid of Fred Flintstone for this specific reason, whatever that reason is. Provided, however, that the vote of an elected official on a matter, other than in connection with a conflict of interest violation, shall not constitute valid grounds for a recall. That is to say, a person was elected, they did their job lawfully and appropriately and voted on something. If people don't like the vote, that's not the basis of a recall. So those are changes that were made, and I just wanted to describe them to the board members. Board members got this revised draft yesterday because the town attorney finalized the legalese yesterday. And so it is now up to the board to just talk about and decide, do we want to adopt a select board warrant article? And what are the numbers? What is the devil in the details? What is the number for the affidavit? What is the number for the petition? And do you agree with the other language and codicils in here? So I know that was long-winded and I wanted to tee up the ball, but I'll start with Select Board Member Mills, as he was.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, I made the motion last time to table, and
Yep.
while we set specifically the date, the next meeting, a motion to take it off the table is not necessary under Robert's rules, but I would like to speak to that particular motion, if I may.
Sure.
Thank you very much. Last meeting, you made some good, valid points of why we should consider the recall. And it gave me pause to think about how we go about the process. And I'm not comfortable with the process that you've outlined. We're not a home rule petition town. We actually act under a charter that was last amended under Chapter 50, the Acts of 1973. And in the charter, it talks about petitions of being no less than 5%. Originally, it was 4%, but it was changed to 5%. So the language, numbers you have in the recall language is not consistent with our charter. And the other thing, you talk about the board and current policy. We have a Town Manager Act. That Town Manager Act in Section 2 talks about how selectmen react when a vacancy occurs by reason of death, resignation, change of residence, or other disability. There's no language referring to how to fill a vacancy because of a recall. That's Section 2. Section 4 has the same language for the school committee. So the Town Manager Act is moot as how to react when there's a recall vacancy. Mm-hmm. And I think we really should look at reviewing the charter, the Town Manager Act that hasn't been reviewed for 25 years, before we start adding recall policies that are not specified in the Town Manager Act. So again, I'm going to make the motion to table this effort till such time as we can have a committee review the charter, Town Manager Act, and perhaps come up with language for a recall petition to add to said documents. I think that's the proper way to go about this. So that's my motion to table this indefinitely.
I second that motion. And may I speak?
So there's a motion made and seconded. Yes, you can speak to the motion. You seconded it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The concept of a recall petition kind of causes me to shudder. I have been active in town government for nearly half a century, and in and out of this building for half a century. and I have known hundreds of town meeting members and probably close to 75 or 100 members of the Board of Selectmen. This seems to me a very drastic component to add to our governmental process. I also commend my chairman for a very scholarly job of looking up and proposing something that may eventually, in substantial measure, be adopted. But I am concerned that in some respects this will be seen as a reactionary action by the board to some recent events in town government and politics. And I don't want something like this to be presented to the town meeting as a reaction to one or two isolated instances of what some people have perceived as going wrong in our government. Having said this is a masterful piece of work and shows all kinds of work, not only by the chairman, but by the town clerk, I support the notion of having the matter postponed until we do a review of the charter, and it seems to me the review of our charter is Town Meeting Act, Manager Act is a very important thing to be doing this time before I get too old and die. So, with that compliment to the chair and to the clerk, I support Mr. Bennett's recommendation to further table discussion tonight.
Is there other comments on the motion?
I agree too. I like Dan's thoroughness. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for all your hard work, and Town Clerk Ms. Ellsworth for her work too. But I think we need to do exactly what they're both saying, review the charter and the Town Managers Act.
So I'm going to be the lone man on this one, and I'll tell you why. A home rule petition is designed expressly and explicitly to provide for relief that is not in town charters or the state constitution. It is, by intent, very similar to a ZBA finding, where you're saying and you're letting the elected officials, in this case, the House and the Senate, say, we agree that this is not something that is in the Constitution, the state constitution, and may not be in the, and therefore a town can petition for relief. And this is a petition for relief, is what it is. And so we can petition for relief that is outside our own charter and outside our own Town Manager Act and say, this is what we want. And yes, we understand that the charter is as old as it is, and the Town Manager Act that's old as it is has not evolved with time, and it doesn't contain recall language because we didn't have recalls at the time. This document would allow for that exemption, as it were, and say, here is a process by which the citizens who elected someone for particular sound reasons and having passed certain thresholds that were high enough to constitute more than just a disagreement on an issue, or disagreement on a vote, or disagreement on a position. This would allow the citizens to remove someone who truly should be removed by their actions. If someone is, right now, if someone is convicted of, if someone is charged with murder on a board or commission, they can't be removed until their next election. If they commit a crime, if they commit embezzlement in their company, and for whatever reason don't go to jail, there's still a sitting voting person on the board. And there has to be some threshold by which we say, this is unacceptable, and the citizens who elected them say they should no longer be serving us. And so the motion is to table this indefinitely isn't actionable. It is table it indefinitely until some later time when we get to the charter, when we get to the Town Manager Act, which is both daunting efforts that will take quite a while. And I can tell you that there are people who are looking to the select board and requested the select board take this up as a select board article that could then, on their own, do a citizens article. A citizens warrant is available to them, as it always has been. And what I was trying to do is strike a balance based on other communities, not make it more heavy-handed than other communities, not make it easier than other communities, but strike a balance. And as we can see by the document I gave you, the mode average, the most consistent number was 20%. Adopt that. Not make it harder, not make it an unsurmountable number. It is a high number. It's a very high number, but it's not insurmountable, and there may be rise to the occasion a necessity to remove someone we think should not serve the public. And the boards don't have that discretion. The individual boards don't have that discretion. And this is language that indeed overrides the Town Managers Act and overrides those sections of the charter that we send to the legislature, and they agree, yes, these things, the state constitution will allow it, but here's what we will do. So I'm not going to support a motion to table indefinitely. That's just punting it. That's kicking the ball down the road, and that's not even kicking it down to the road.
Mr. Chairman, you have a motion and a second.
And
Would
I
you
have,
please
I
move-
have the
and
opportunity
you're
to respond.
And you're repeating yourself.
I don't care that you think I'm repeating myself. I have the opportunity to respond, and I will. So, I don't believe we should openly kick this down and not do what the citizens have asked us to do. I'm making, I don't agree with it. I don't think we should have to have a recall position, but we've evolved into a point where sometimes these things happen. And I think it's a necessary thing to do, and I will not support a open-ended, just pass the buck motion to table this indefinitely. Those are my comments. And I'll thank you not to interrupt me when I'm making my comments logistically. So I'll move to, is there any other comment on the motion? All in favor of the motion to table this indefinitely, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. So be it. Thank you. The town manager will report to the board on various items of interest.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, you received the insert that caused the postage to spike was the stripped-down version of the budget, which is balanced. I guess there's no spoiler there. I think every year for 150 some odd years, there's been a balanced budget presented. But we are looking ahead to March 12th. We'll have the presentation in this room for the board and members of the public. And it does sound like the technology that we've been discussing tonight may in fact be in place for that meeting. So I will not do any big reveals tonight. I will note, because it's been a discussion point here recently, we are looking at another increase in our Essex Tech assessment of close to $500,000. That represents about 20% of all of our new spending within the tax levy this year. We've made very little headway trying to discuss this issue with the Essex Tech School Committee. I have engaged the mayors of the major cities in the district. They also have some concerns about the way that admissions are conducted there. I've had a conversation with our state delegation. Senate Council has indicated that the town would be within its rights to submit a petition to set its student population there at a level that it felt was appropriate. But that's something that I'm trying to discuss with the mayors before we start the warrant process here. I'm collecting that information. But that is, I think, one of the things that jumps out. We planted seeds and water those seeds. We've seen a decline in debt service this year thanks to some refunding. Our health care increases this year are very affordable thanks to changes that we've made in recent years, and most of those gains are wiped out yet again by the assessment at the tech. So it's frustrating. We need to find a solution. and we're engaging with our local and state stakeholders to try to figure out what that looks like. I know the chairman circulated a short video today that showed what was going on with our flagpole during the squalls the other night. The video was something to behold. It did sustain structural damage that requires it to be replaced. David Lane and Relief Rockna and their teams are hard at work finding a vendor. It's been removed safely. We're working with Maya, the town's insurer, and the goal is to get that pole replaced prior to Memorial Day. That's something that the Veterans Council would like very much to have done, so we're going to do our best to try to line up the work to get that completed.
By the way, I just want to give credit. There was someone else who posted that video. I stole those
No, it's
from
a-
when I took.
Yeah, it's a great video.
I found it on Facebook. Someone else had taken it. It was from the perspective of the post office, looking over CVS and watching that pole whip back and forth like a fly rod. It was amazing to see.
It was.
Well, thank you for sharing it.
Yeah. It was hard to envision how damage could happen, but that squall had a lot of wind.
The next update, an RFP is going out this week for the strategic plan that we've been talking about. We received a $150,000 grant through the state to fund that. We're hoping to get the responses to the RFP back prior to town meeting in the event that there's a differential between the grant and the full cost of the plan. But we've already had vendors reach out inquiring about the work because these vendors are monitoring the state budget at all times to see what is getting funded. So it's on the radar, which is exciting. And we had one interview last week, 4 so far this week for the Equity and Inclusion Director position. We have another interview lined up for tomorrow. Some really good interviews. Staff was joined by Dutra Shea-Joko from the Human Rights and Inclusion Committee, who helped us conduct those interviews. So that's moving forward, which we're very excited about. And the last item, I had a chance this morning to attend a legislative breakfast hosted by the Peabody Chamber, and it was attended by government students from Peabody schools, and I'm going to read one of the questions they asked, which is really, I think, interesting for the state officials and the mayors and the managers to answer. And the student said, "Gridlock seems to be prevalent in national politics and in our Congress as the country becomes more partisan. On the local level, do you feel the effects of the radicalization and/or do you experience gridlock in a similar fashion?" There was a second question about, have you had any accomplishments in the past 2 years that have sort of counterbalanced some of the negativity? And what was really interesting was it was interesting to hear the state officials talking about the collaboration that occurs in the State House, but the mayors and managers were experiencing a very different world in the last 2 years. And we sort of collectively, the mayors have a different take, but I was joined by Andy Sheehan, who's the town administrator in Middleton, and I said that Andy and I are bound by a professional code that requires that we refrain from politics. And we think about the island, we think about it as like the island of political neutrality, right? And so we're not supposed to take a side. But in the last 2, 4, 8, 10 years, that island has been shrinking and shrinking and shrinking and shrinking to the point where we don't know what's political and what's not. Early in my career, I had an experience, I was working as an assistant in Avon, Connecticut when Sandy Hook occurred. And one of the most memorable, we had a monthly managers meeting, we'd all get together once a month and have lunch. And one of the most heated debates I ever heard in this group was kind of split right down the middle about managers felt like we should be putting out a statement after Sandy Hook and members who felt like that would be a violation of our code of ethics to do so, and we ended up not doing that. But I think since that time, with the pandemic, with some of the social unrest, a lot of the national politics have been compressed down to the local level, and it's been discouraging and it's been hard. But then we started hearing about examples and experiences of work still has to get done at the local level. We have to keep putting one foot in front of the other. We have to provide services. We have to build elementary schools, and so it was nice to hear the mayors and the state officials talking about situations in the last couple of years where they had a chance to kind of step back and remember why they do it. And I shared the opening of the Smith School, that in the midst of all this, we were opening this elementary school, and even though the kids were masked, it was really cool at the grand opening last fall when the doors opened and the kids ran in and they're looking around at all the shiny surfaces and they remember the old school, now they're in the new school, and it's like suddenly the pandemic and all of the other stuff is sort of in the background. And the last time, I know that I'm rambling right now, but I was reminded, I didn't share this morning, but I was reminded of a session a few years ago at a national conference when Bob O'Neill, who was the longtime executive director of the ICMA, which is the International City and County Manager Association, was speaking to 3,000 managers from all over the world before his retirement. And he said he was the director of ICMA for a long, long time. He said, I visited literally thousands of communities in the United States in my career. And he said, my favorite part of visiting anywhere is, back when there were taxi drivers, was talking up the taxi drivers on the way from the airport to the hotel and the hotel to the convention. And he said, everybody disagrees about everything, and the one thing that has been consistently true in my entire career is I have never met a single person who says they want their community to be worse tomorrow. And it was kind of a powerful reminder that everybody disagrees. People are going to disagree with the decisions that get made. They're going to disagree with the policies that get put in place. But nobody wants their community to be worse tomorrow than it was yesterday. And we all thank the student for a question about something other than unemployment insurance or water mains or climate change or transportation funding or ARPA or any of that. Because it was, a lot of times with state officials, the answers are very rehearsed, and this was a question that caused them to sort of stop and dig deep and think. So I just wanted to share that because it was the first in-person event that I've had in a long, long time. And as is typically the case, the young people threw us a curveball, which is nice. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Is there any questions or comments on the town manager's report?
If I may, Mr. Chairman, a comment to Steve, and I made this to him before. He's dealing with many issues that we never envisioned when we hired him. These things just didn't exist in our vocabulary. And as the manager, even staying neutral, if you will, on island, you've handled many issues very well. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions for the town manager? I'll accept a motion to accept the consent calendar.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And we will now go to correspondence, select board new business, previous new public business updates, board closing comments. Select board member Mills.
The Human Rights and Inclusion Committee continues to have a very, very active year. The current planning process is to attend to the events and celebration of Pride Month, which is in June. A flag raising has already been scheduled. A community picnic, so to speak, on the lawn of the Peabody Institute Library is being planned. There is all kinds of enthusiasm that I never dreamt would happen in Danvers on these issues by all kinds of people that I never expected would be interested, and it's really quite affirming to watch. At the senior center, Mr. Bradstreet reminds me that our senior men's, we got to be careful about that because, some women are going to want to. There is a monthly dinner, which is senior men's dinner, which we've missed for the last year anyway, and it's going to be resuming again during the month of March. And otherwise, things are under control at the senior center. It's a wonderful place, provides all kinds of life-affirming experience for older people in our community. And otherwise, I have nothing else to report. Thank you.
Thank you. Select board member Duggan.
Well, thank you. Just a couple of items here. The first is just to go back to the discussion we were having earlier this evening related to remote meetings, remote public meetings. So I read recently that Governor Baker signed an extension on February 15th to modify the open meeting law, allowing our town boards and committees to continue meeting remotely until Friday, July 15th. Now, that previous order was set to expire on April 1st, so this this adjustment to the open meeting law has been extended another several months. And so we have one board that hasn't met since February of 2020, which is more than 2 years ago. And I would hope that that board doesn't take advantage of this extension and then makes it an effort to kind of meet in a public place before that. And then the other topic that I wanted to just touch on has to do with zoning. And so last night at the ZBA meeting, approval was given for a use variance at the Hollywood Hits site to allow the outside storage of automobiles. And so what will happen, what the applicant is looking to do is to knock down the old movie theater and build a new sort of a showroom and a service center. It still needs to go to the planning board for site plan review and that type of thing. But I think the ZBA kind of struggled with allowing the use variance. Some of the members are not in favor of that of that option. It's not used by most cities and towns in the Commonwealth. But I think we know that many dealerships in town already have the use variance to store vehicles outdoors. And so if you've been up to that site recently, in the last couple of years, you know that it's an eyesore and that it's really it's an area that needed to be kind of found a reuse for. And so there was an application last year to build a large apartment building up there that would have required some variances to allow residential. This is a commercial 3 zone, and so residential it's not allowed by right, and it wasn't deemed to be suitable for that site. So I think allowing the new car dealership up there will provide some jobs and also hopefully some additional tax revenue for the town. But it points to a bigger issue about the Endicott Street corridor. There doesn't seem to be a master plan, and I think the planning department has been looking into that to provide some type of overlay that would allow perhaps residential in that commercial 3 zone. And specifically thinking about 152 Endicott Street, which is the site of the former Denny's. There was an application there not too long ago to put in a couple of hundred apartments in there in a 5-story building. And so I think that's an example where we're being reactionary and that applicants are taking it upon themselves to make a plan for a specific site where the planning department and town meeting needs to think about what that entire corridor should look like in the future. There's a lot of asphalt and parking lots along that street that could perhaps be reused for other uses, maybe residential, similar to what's happening at the North Shore Mall. But I think that we really need to be proactive in addressing that corridor. You can see that any place where there's 1-story commercial buildings, that they're not really long for this world because the land is so expensive that it's better use is to have 2- or 3-story buildings, similar to what we've done in this area of High Street and Maple Street, where we have commercial on the first floor and residential on the second. I think that's the way to go in terms of creating more housing opportunities in town, rather than building additions or making single-family homes into 2 families or EFLAs. And so I hope that that's something that the town will continue to pursue. I think they did a great job with doing the overlays in the downtown area, so I think, I'm sure that they could do something similar out in that area, out in that Endicott Street corridor. So that's all I have.
So I think the town manager would like to address the meeting.
Yeah, the planning board and staff are in full agreement with that. I think, I would say two things. David Fields has already started doing some of the preliminary background work in that area with the rezoning of the downtown. That completed not all of, but the vast majority of the I-1 districts, which had been the planning board's focus for more than a decade. And the proposal that was started through the process for last fall's town meeting included components that address the point you're raising. One was to eliminate use variances because we are in the minority at this point in terms of communities in the Commonwealth that use those, and to replace it with the planned development concept, which would lend itself to, if you think about what's been happening at the North Shore Mall or what could happen at the Liberty Tree Mall, that's a concept where a landowner can come to the town and say, I have an idea. It doesn't comply with any of your current zoning, but I'd like to talk through my idea with you. And then it creates a process where the landowner can work with technical staff to develop something that ultimately goes to town meeting and can be approved. So instead of a variance to put residential at the old Denny's site and a variance to do something else all in the same area, you could have a master plan presented for that area that says, this is what it looks like 25 years from now. They get the approval from town meeting, and then they can build out the project following business cycles in terms of what makes sense when. I think that was a concept that the boards and town meeting weren't ready to have the discussion yet, but the feedback was, we'd like to talk more about this. Let's come back. I don't think we're going to be ready for this fall, but those are kind of two, they're parallel, they're related, but the C1 is the next focus area for zoning. But I think that the concept of the planned development, particularly when you're talking about redevelopment, because we're mostly built out or protected at this point. So zoning should be proactive and forward-looking in terms of planning ahead, but that there's never a case where, no matter how hard the consultants and staff in town meeting works, the day we finalize the zoning is the day that it starts to become stale, and 3 years from now, something will come along that nobody thought of. So points are well taken, and I think that you'll find that everybody agrees.
And I just want to make just an additional point that you kind of jogged my memory. So if you've been to places like a Legacy Place in Dedham or Patriot Place down in Foxborough, you can see where the concept of an indoor mall is something from, obviously from the 60s or 70s, and these two locations that I just mentioned, they're very very popular and crowded, and it has more of a flavor of a kind of a town center rather than just some walled off, climate controlled environment. People don't mind being outside. There's a lot of interaction with people, and I know that they're quite successful. So if you could put housing on above those, I think you'd have a recipe for success.
You forgot the closest one in Linfield.
Linfield
Marketplace.
Marketplace,
Yep,
yeah.
yep.
We have the house on that, too.
No, I think that's, we met with.
That's great.
We had a meeting, we check in periodically with Liberty Tree with Simon, and a couple of years ago, we said to them, let us know what are your future plans? What do you need that you can't currently do today? And we said, for example, housing. And they said, oh. And then 6 months later, they were building housing at the North Shore Mall. So they, I don't know. We'll continue to work at it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm all set, thanks.
Board Member Doug?
Bernard, yeah.
No, I was gonna say
Maureen
Doug,
Bernard, no, that's okay.
I said Doug, and I meant to say Bernard.
That's okay, Gardner. I like that idea, too, like the outdoor with the housing, the malls, like, let's see, Danvers Housing Authority, everything's going well there with the seniors. Cindy Dunn continues to do an awesome job with everybody. If you have any concerns or complaints, please reach out to Cindy. Sometimes some of the seniors that live in the housing, get a little, I don't want to say, a little gossipy, if you want to say that. With regards to Arbor Day and the motorcycles everywhere, yes, motorcycles, the Arbor Day's awesome. The motorcycles, let's be careful out there with the roads, the potholes. which the town workers, I got to compliment them on Dayton Street. I've seen a lot of those potholes. Those guys are out there in the cold. Thank you very much for fixing, the potholes that they can at this time of year. More to follow. I also want to say that Ashley Steve's Road Race does a fabulous job, and the Danvers Rail Trail, Matt, you're on that too. They do a fantastic job, Paul and Mark and Charlie. So anything that you want to do to help them with fundraising, they're always looking. Talk to Larry Peralt. And I also want to say thank you to Danvers Hardware, for their many years of service. A fine family. I don't know, I've been going there for years since they've opened, and I wish them well, and I just want to say thank you to all of them for having such a wonderful hardware store, a family-owned hardware store, and we're going to miss them. That's about it.
Thank you. So for me, everybody's received the same emails I have regarding concerns about the open meetings, the in-person presentation of meetings. I did receive a letter, not an email. There is on every year during the month of February, March, Drapo McPherson Post 180 presents its Bruce P. Eaton Americanism Award to a person or an organization. They're doing it again this year on the 10th, March 10th at 7 p.m. at the hall on 5 EFW. I'll be going in representing the board. I'm not going to say the recipient. I'm not sure, and they didn't indicate in the letter whether that person knows or not, but they're certainly a well-deserving person. So I'll be attending that, but other board members are certainly welcome to join me. I'm sure it's an open invitation, and others who may hear this are welcome to attend as well, 7 p.m. at the VFW Hall. And there's that. I don't have anything else, so I will, as usual, end with Mr. Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A quiet month. The only correspondence I really had was on the potholes in Dayton Street, and I happened to be dropping my grandson off one afternoon on Dayton Street and drove by as they were finishing up the work. It was quite a stretch of road that they fixed up, so I hope everybody up there is satisfied. They were actually doing it Thursday before the snowstorm. I don't know what happened to it with the snowstorm, I'm afraid to ask. But anyways, Excel Paving and our staff from DPW were out there, did a great job. As always, see a veteran, male, female, young, old, please say thank you for the service. And good night, Danvers.
Okay, thank you.
How did it hold up after the storm?